Welcome to Surrender School. The Gifts of Imperfection. Session 7. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's great to see all of you. I don't know what it's doing in your neck of the woods, but it's finally raining a little bit here, so I'm happy. But I hope everyone is doing well. Okay. I know these were shorter. These chapters were shorter, but these guideposts were really, really, they pinched me. I thought they were great. So the first one that we're going to go over is guidepost number 5, cultivating intuition and trusting faith. But I thought her byline was even better, letting go of the need for certainty. Wow. First thing we're going to start going over the intuition part first. So first thing I want to look at is on the bottom of page 87 in the old version and page 114 in the new, right under the heading of intuition. Intuition is not independent of any reasoning process. In fact, psychologists believe that intuition is a rapid-fire, unconscious, associating process like a mental puzzle. The brain makes an observation, scans its files, and matches the observation with existing memories, knowledge, and experiences. Once it puts together a series of matches, we get a gut on what we've observed. You know, these for me are like aha moments when things, it's like they magically come together and they click into place. That's what these kinds of intuitive moments feel like to me. All of the gears kind of slide into place and things make sense, and I feel more assured. But it is a feeling like I was thinking about it. Where do I feel that in my body? And I do feel that in my gut. That's where I feel it, right there. So I thought that was really interesting. Next, skip a paragraph and then the paragraph that starts in my research, bottom of 114 or the top half of 88. In my research, I found that what silences our intuitive voice is our need for certainty. Most of us are not very good at not knowing. We like sure things and guarantees so much that we don't pay attention to the outcomes of our brain's matching process. For example, rather than respecting a strong internal instinct, we become fearful and look for assurances from others. What do you think? Should I do it? Do you think it's a good idea, or do you think I'll regret it? What would you do? Do you do this kind of stuff, this checking with other people? Because I know I do. And it was the first time that this was explained to me that that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm doubting my own gut instinct. I'm doubting my own gut feeling, you know, and getting comfortable with uncertainty is really hard work for me. When you think about it logically and reasonably, it's just ridiculous. I want certainty all the way until I draw my last breath. And then I want more certainty. Where's the fun in that? I mean, where's the adventure in that? If I truly knew every single thing from now until the moment I died, how boring that would be. One of the things that I love about programs so much is it is an adventure. I'm always learning. I'm always finding out things. I'm always growing. If it truly was a one and done thing, if it truly was I do this, now I'm going to be abstinent forever and life is just going to go my way. Oh, I think it would be really rough. There is that battle in me, that part that knows that life is a grand adventure, and the other part that demands guarantees. And I'll tell you that it's the part that demands guarantees that drives me back into the food. It's the part that wants assurances and wants and to know that everything is going to come out my way. That's the part that leads me into food. Next thing I want to bring up is at the bottom of page 88 in the old, or about halfway down on page 115. When we start polling people, it's often because we don't trust our own knowing. We want assurances and folks with whom we can share the blame if things don't pan out. Ouch. That was one of those pinches. Sharing blame. And if you think about it, now I'm going to put into my toolbox, when I start polling people's opinions, what that is going to be is a cue to myself that I need to get with my higher power and start journaling on this stuff, because I'm getting something, but I'm just doubting myself, or I want an assurance that it's perfect. And so I think that that's going to be like my new red flag. If I start asking people what I should do or what they should do, boom, I need to get with my higher power and get with my journal. I like those kind of things. I like a red flag that can cue me that way. They're great tools for me to use. I don't have to get upset that I'm yet again wanting to poll people. It's just a sign for me to do something. Okay. Oh, and then she says for the rest of that thought, ironically, since doing this research, surveying has become a red flag for me. It tells me that I'm feeling vulnerable about making a decision. I think the harder part of that whole thought process right there was about wanting to be able to share blame. And in one of my old careers, people would refer people around to other people to see other practitioners as a way to spread the liability, as a way to spread the blame if something should go wrong. So I had to giggle when I saw that. Okay. Next thing, it's just the next paragraph. So it's top of 89 in the old, or the bottom of 115 in the new. As I mentioned earlier, if we learn to trust our intuition, it can even tell us that we don't have a good instinct on something and that we need more data. Another example of how our need for certainty sabotages our intuition is when we ignore our gut's warning to slow down, gather more information, or reality check our expectations. I'm just going to do it. I don't care anymore. I hate to admit that, but this is one that has cropped up in my life. I'm tired of thinking about it. It's too stressful. I'd rather just do it than wait another second. I can't stand not knowing. Whenever I have ignored my gut's cue to me to slow down, I have regretted it. I have always regretted it. I understand the feeling of just not wanting to delay, not wanting to think about it one more second, and let's just get this over. That's one that comes through my mind as well. I'm learning to trust myself. I never used to, but I am learning to do that one little step at a time in program, as I do more of what I say I'm going to do and not do more of what I say I'm not going to do. I learn to trust myself one little step at a time. And then I don't rush headlong into things as much anymore. That's quite a balance she's putting up here when she juxtaposes those two ideas about, polling people because we want certainty and assurance, and then sabotaging ourselves on the other end of the spectrum by just screw it, I'm just going to do it. So balancing that, well, I guess balance is probably the answer for most things. Next thing I want to talk about is in the following paragraph, last sentence, mid 89, mid 116. Is that right? Mid 116. We know that fact finding must lead us away from what we think we want. I always tell myself if I'm afraid to run the numbers or put pencil to paper, I shouldn't do it. And I like this. I like that short if-then statement test that she puts for herself. If I'm afraid to run the numbers, then I shouldn't do it. If I'm afraid to really look at something in program, then I need to go back to my higher power. I like those if-then statements. And the reason is because it gives me something to do. And I like to have something to do. I would rather take an action than sit and stew. But I like that her whole notion about if she feels a resistance or an unwillingness to look at something, then that's another red flag that needs to be dealt with, either with her, with your sponsor, with your higher power, with yourself in contemplation, meditation, journaling. It's a red flag to do something. Maybe not what you think you want to do, but to do something to look at it. Next thing is, I think it's her definition of intuition. It's the bottom of 116 in the new version and the bottom of 89 in the old version. I really like this. Intuition is not a single way of knowing. It's our ability to hold space for uncertainty and our willingness to trust the many ways we've developed knowledge and insight, including instinct, experience, faith, and reason. Intuition as a way of knowing. And the big book talks about this a little bit. And, for me, I was talking about before that intuitive thoughts are like spiritual experiences for me. And I really do believe that intuition is a form of, my higher power getting in conscious contact with me. Not me getting in conscious contact with my higher power, but the other way around. And so that's why they feel like such spiritual experiences to me. But I really like that definition that she put down there. All right, top of page 90 or the top of page 117, right under the headline Faith. I've come to realize that faith and reason are not natural enemies. Wow. Because that is, traditionally, even academically or philosophically, faith and reason are put as opposites, as polar opposites. And I like here that she says they're not. It's our human need for certainty and our need to be right that have pitted faith and reason against each other in an almost reckless way. We force ourselves to choose and defend one way of knowing the world at the expense of the other. I really love that idea. Faith and reason can live happily together. That they're both ways of knowing the world. And I think they can work together for us. At least they do for me in this program. It took me a long time to figure that out. But they do work really well together for me when I use them both. Middle of the next paragraph, mid 117, or the second paragraph on page 90. But this work has forced me to see that it's our fear of the unknown and our fear of being wrong that create most of our conflict and anxiety. We need both faith and reason to make meaning in an uncertain world. Fear of the unknown. That was a main driver of my disease. Demanding to know the unknowable and demanding to control the uncontrollable. Those were my main triggers back into food. And it's that, here's another one of those pinches, our fear of being wrong, and our fear of the unknown and the fear of being wrong. Isn't that the thing that makes us crazy? We need to make a decision. There's unknown. We can't know everything, and we're afraid of being wrong. Don't we do that in program a lot? I think people do that a lot when they bump up against step 12 and the notion of becoming a sponsor. And it's I don't know how to be a sponsor. I don't know everything about program. It doesn't matter. You don't need to know any of those things. You don't need to know everything about program. All you need to know is about your own program and about your own experience, strength, and hope. But I think that those two ideas were kind of pinchy for me when I read them this week. Next thing I want to read is middle of the next paragraph down. So further down on page 117, further down on page 90. At first, I thought that faith meant there's a reason for everything. I personally struggled with that because I'm not comfortable with using God or faith or spirituality to explain tragedy. It actually feels like substituting certainty for faith when people say there's a reason for everything. That is really how I feel. I don't want to disrespect people who are suffering or who are experiencing a tragedy right now by simplifying it. It almost feels dismissive in a way. It makes it okay that you're suffering or that you're experiencing a tragedy because there's some reason behind it. And I can't remember the guy's name. Alan Berger quoted him, though, in our emotional sobriety book about using that kind of thing as a spiritual bypass, trying to make something that is painful okay by spiritually bypassing the fact that pain is being experienced and making it okay by that there's a reason for it. Somehow that's supposed to make it okay. And so I agree with her on this. She said in the very next paragraph, but I quickly learned from the interviews that faith meant something else to these people. Here's how I define faith based on the research interviews. Faith is a place of mystery where we find the courage to believe in what we cannot see and the strength to let go of our fear of uncertainty. So I guess really what she's talking about here is faith by definition is uncertainty. And learning to live in faith is learning to live in uncertainty. I really liked that. Unless, I'm feeling uncertain and then I want to throw the book across the room. But otherwise, I really like this idea. This definition means that I have the strength to let go of my fear of uncertainty. Not that uncertainty is taken away by faith, but that my faith gives me strength to face the uncertainty. See the difference there? Next paragraph, it's the bottom of page 90 and it's the top of page 118 in the new. I also learned that it's not always the scientists who struggle with faith and the religious who fully embrace uncertainty. Many forms of fundamentalism and extremism are about choosing certainty over faith. And I wanted to bring this piece up because I think we bump up against this in program. People who are intolerant of other people's way of working the program, they feel threatened by it, as if someone else working the program or interpreting the program differently than they do somehow puts their program and their recovery in jeopardy. And I think we have to hold on to the notion that my way of working program doesn't invalidate anybody else's way of working program. That's the beauty of this program, is that we can all come in and find our way through it. And there's room for all of us here. And I cherish that. Love and tolerance is our code from the big book. I cherish that. And I try and remind myself of it as much as I can. Okay, the next thing I want to put in is, it's about 2/3 of the way down on page 91 and mid 119 in the new version. It's in the Get Inspired paragraph toward the bottom, where she says, I absolutely love this quote from, oh gosh, I always get this guy's name wrong. I can never say it right. Paulo Coelho, I can never say it right. The Alchemist. Intuition is really a sudden immersion of the soul into the universal current of life, where the histories of all people are connected, and we are able to know everything because it's all written there. I mean, this is how I plug into my higher power. I'm plugging into this whole life force. I'm plugging into everyone who has worked program before me and found their way through it. I am plugging into that. And to me, that is just the most beautiful spiritual definition of intuition I've ever heard. And I put a little star by it, and I circled it, and I underlined it. It really spoke to me. It felt very powerful to me. So I think that one's going to go in my little book of sayings that I want to keep. The next thing I want to talk about, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it for this particular guidepost. The last thing in the first sentence in the Get Going section. When I'm really scared or unsure, I need something right away to calm my cravings for certainty. For me, the serenity prayer does the trick. I will tell you the reason that the serenity prayer does the trick for me is because it goes back to the most fundamental thing that I need to know in any given situation. What do I have control over, and what do I not have control over in this moment? And even when I am confronted with an overpowering craving or urge to eat or food thought, I go, if you go right to the serenity prayer, you were going right to the heart of what do you control and what don't you control. And I ask my higher power for that wisdom to tell me the difference, to show me, okay, what is my next right step here? And that has saved me more times than I can count, because it brings it down to an actual action I can take in the middle of something. Because I told you before, I don't like to sit and stew in it. Give me an action, even if it's a fruitless action. I don't care. Give me something to do. And so I really liked this, that she brought it back to the serenity prayer. Of course, that would resonate for us in, being in program. Okay, here's the next guidepost. Cultivating creativity. That sounds lovely, but what really was the pinch was letting go of comparison. What is it? To compare is to despair, right? Isn't that one of our program sayings? Love it. Okay. First thing I wanted to point out was in the old version, it's the bottom of page 94, and in the new version, it's the top of page 122. Bottom of the paragraph that starts in New Orleans. Creativity gave way to that stifling combination of fitting in and being better than, also known as comparison. Comparison is all about conformity and competition. Competition. At first, it seems like conforming and competing are mutually exclusive, but they're not. When we compare, we want to see who or what is best out of a specific collection of alike things. Oh man, this is so true. And since I never felt like I was ever enough, the comparison was automatic that I flunked, that I came out on the bad side of it. And what that did, it led to a constant feeling of failure. And because competition is part of it, it made me not want to try. Why even bother? Why even try? And I thought that was such a beautifully succinct way of explaining to me that tendency that I had always had. I assumed I was going to fail and come out on the short stick of the comparison, so I am not going to even compete, period. That makes me a little sad these days when I think about what I didn't do because I couldn't be perfect or number one or whatever at it. So I didn't even try. That was kind of a life way of doing things for me. Let's see. And then at the bottom of that paragraph that we were reading, that last paragraph that we were reading, so it's the top of 95 and further down on 122. When we compare, we want to be the best or have the best of our group. I want to be number one. I hate to admit that, because my mom was really competitive and I hated it. And then to see that quality in myself as well, it's given me a way to work on some of that resentment around my mom, because I see that in myself now. So it gives me a hook. It gives me a way in that I can find some compassion for her for that. Okay, the next thing I want to bring up is just the very next paragraph. So top of 95, bottom of 122. The comparison mandate becomes this crushing paradox of fit in and stand out. It's not cultivated self-acceptance, belonging, and authenticity. It's be just like everyone else, but better. Man. Has this ever happened to you in program? That kind of, I think sometimes this happens when folks first come into program and they get the love and acceptance that you have here. And then they begin this process of fitting in and standing out. And what they do is they do it through service. And they overcommit in service. And then eventually, one day you'll see them, they're doing everything, and then you won't see them anymore. And I think that's what happens to a lot of folks when we come into program. We want to fit in, we want to be part of the group, but we want to be Miss OA. And that seems to be a quick trip to McDonald's. It doesn't really serve us very well to do that. Again, balance. And then, okay, a little bit further down. Now, this was interesting between the old version and the new version. I'm looking at the quote that she quoted Laura Williams in the old book, but she was quoting Teddy Roosevelt in the new book. So she corrected who she got the actual quote from. So in the old book, it says, Laura Williams always says, comparison is the thief of happiness. And I know in the new version, it was Teddy Roosevelt said that comparison is the thief of joy. Either way, it's brilliant. Either way you say it, happiness or joy, it's brilliant. Comparison is a thief of our good feeling about ourselves. Because inevitably, I mean, if you're like me in any way, inevitably the comparison is going to bring me up on the short side. On the short side. I always wound up in the less than category. And you know what was worse? If I ever, which was rare, wound up in the better than category, yuck. I mean, it's that ego, self-centered, self-importance kind of character defect. And that's when I would inadvertently say something to hurt someone, when I found myself in that. That's what I found out through my 4 through 9 process. In one of the last times I went through the steps, was that if I found myself on the winning end of a comparison, then I was a jerk. That's when I behaved like a jerk. At least I kept quiet when I felt like I came up on the short stick. Okay, next thing is down in the next paragraph. So mid 23, 123 in the new version, mid 95 in the old version. Who has time for painting and scrapbooking and photography when the real work of achieving and accomplishing needs to be done? You know, that was my story. And, you know, I came into OA originally in my late 20s. And when I got done with all my schooling and I started into my career, that became the most important thing without exception to me, not my program, not recovery. Who has time for recovery and quiet time and prayer and making calls and sponsoring and working a program? I've got all this achieving and accomplishing that needs to be done. And it just always spells trouble for me when I put anything else in front of my program. That's not to say there aren't other really important things in my life. There are, but I can't give my best to any of those things until I've taken care of my program and my recovery first. Let's see, next is at the bottom of 95 or the bottom of 123. Of course, I know professionally that the more entrenched and reactive we are about an issue, the more we need to investigate our responses. You know that saying in program about if you spot it, you got it. It's again, the more we resist or the more reactive, the bigger a response we get when we're doing our step 10s. And we're starting to notice this pattern of really overreacting to something, then we know that's when we need to do our investigation even more. Maybe, you know, doing that step 10 is going to lead to doing another step 4, a much more in-depth look at what brought step 10 up. Yeah, reactivity is a big thing for me. It's a wonderful way of looking at things. When I'm done reacting. Okay, next thing is at the very top of 96 or at the bottom of 123 on to 124. Starts with let me sum up. Let me sum up what I've learned about creativity from the world of wholehearted living and loving. 1, I'm not very creative doesn't work. There's no such thing as creative people and non-creative people. There are only people who use their creativity and people who don't. Unused creativity doesn't just disappear. It lives within us until it's expressed, neglected to death, or suffocated by resentment and fear. That is incredibly powerful to me. Number 2, the only unique contribution that we will ever make in this world will be born of our creativity. And 3, if we want to make meaning, we need to make art. Cook, write, draw, doodle, paint, scrapbook, take pictures, collage, knit, rebuild an engine, sculpt, dance, decorate, act, sing, it doesn't matter. As long as we're creating, we're cultivating meaning. You know, my talks and the preparation and things I do to do these talks are my works of art. They are my way of bringing creativity in the world. I love sitting down and looking at this stuff, reading someone's work, filtering it through the 12 steps, filtering it through my own experiences, and coming up with something. I love that. It really feeds and nourishes me. And she's right. It gives my life a lot of meaning doing this. It really does. You guys are helping me so much in my program by showing up and listening to me drone on. It really gives me a lot of meaning in my life. It is the way creativity expresses itself through me. Now, other people paint, other people sing, other people dance. Those are not my things. At least not while other people are looking, but at least I can bring my creativity in the world. And that does mean letting go of comparison. Because I got to tell you, I laugh when I get done with these things, not to be TMI, but it's like, I sweat up a storm because it's, I have nerves coming on and doing this stuff, but I always have to remember it's just my opinion that I'm giving. I'm not giving the truth. Who has the truth? I'm just giving my opinion. And, I don't have to compare myself against anybody else. It's just my opinion, but I still sweat. So there you go. The next thing I want to talk about is where she talks at the very bottom of page 96 or the top of 125 in the paragraph that starts, I also realized. She says, writer William Plomer described creativity as the power to connect the seemingly unconnected. And that's what I mean about whenever I read a lot of outside spiritual literature or what I would consider spiritual literature, and it always is connected to the steps for me. It is always connected to program. That's one of the beauties of it, is connecting something that on the surface doesn't seem to be connected to program, but it is for me. And so I love making those connections. I find that stuff really spiritually nurturing, and it's part of the way that I work to enlarge my spiritual life. Last thing I want to talk about in the readings today is at the very top of page 97 in the old version, or mid-page 125 in the new. Start of the paragraphs, it says, letting go of comparison is not a to-do list item. For most of us, it's something that requires constant awareness. And it's me who does it to myself. I'm the only one doing the comparison. No one is doing it for me in my head. It's me. And luckily, I have a foolproof way to know when I am engaging in comparison. I feel like crap. That is my red flag for telling me when I am engaging in comparison. And then I know I need to go to a 10th step. And so it's beautiful. It's so easy. It's an easy way to do it. So I really appreciate that. And awareness is the number one thing you've got to have before you can do any of that. All right. That's all I've got today on the reading. See you next week.